I would suggest is because he is combining the two types of thinking. He has aspects of type 1 thinking, he has aspects of type 2 thinking. Similarly, what you will find with these incrementalist scientists is that to the extent that they come up with theories, they will often be these overcomplicated theories that don't pass the test of parsimony, that are too complicated or whatever. Whereas again, and this is possibly partly because they lack a certain degree of confidence in themselves. They lack an intuitive feeling that they're definitely right and they've got it. And they've cracked it because they're always focused on this type 2 thinking, which is all about slow deliberation and not being certain and whatever. Whereas the genius is not like that. The genius is certain, instinctively certain. He has almost a messianic mission towards the truth. And he is so intelligent that he works things out, but he has a personality that says, yes, I've worked it out and I'm sure that I am right. And so you'll get these people that will say, oh, people that are geniuses that I've met, oh, they're very humble. Well, they haven't met any geniuses. Geniuses aren't humble. We know the kind of people that are geniuses. James Watson would be a kind of a modern genius. Francis Crick. These people weren't humble at all. These people were often rather arrogant, actually. So we know from detailed studies that have been done on the kind of people that are geniuses that they combine outlier high IQ. But normally scientists combine high IQ with being high in conscientiousness and high in agreeableness. What the conscientiousness means is they are rule following, they have high impulse control, i.e. it militates in favour of this slow kind of thinking. They're not impulsive. Agreeableness means they're cooperative, they're able to take criticism, they're able to listen to criticism of their ideas, and so they get better and whatever, and so this makes them better scientists. The genius is different. The genius is outlier high IQ, mega high IQ, much higher IQ than the incrementalist scientist, combined with moderately low agreeableness and moderately low conscientiousness. This means, as I said, that he doesn't care about offending people or whatever, and so therefore he's happy to present his original idea, no matter how offensive against vested interests it is. But also in terms of conscientiousness, it means that he thinks outside the box. It means that he's creative. It means that he has ideas. He has instincts almost. He has sort of gut instincts, and he goes with them and he tests them and whatever. There's a strong emotional dimension to how he thinks, a creative dimension, an intuitive dimension. And that's what type 1 thinking is about. Type 1 thinking is intuitive. And the genius will tend to be highly intuitive. He will come up with these intuitions and he will these possibilities that will just come to him in a kind of reverie, and he will test them. And the third aspect, and it crosses over with the agreeableness aspect because empathy, as we mentioned earlier, is autism. Now, there's very good evidence that shows that once you get to outlier high IQ, people that have outlier high IQ, like geniuses, have elements of autism. Now, what is autism? Autism is a number of traits that come together. It's basically identified by basically a lack of empathy, that you don't understand the feelings of others, that you can't read people's feelings from external states, that you're not interested in their feelings. But essentially it's been put by Simon Baron-Cohen on a kind of scale. With at the one end you have empathy, that you're very empathetic and that's what you're interested in, and at the other end you have autism, you have systematizing. And systematizing, which could be argued, of course, to be a type 2 issue, systematizing, logically and coldly systematizing, this is the extreme of autism. You are very, very high in systematizing, but you are very low in empathy. But there are other dimensions to autism as well, and these also are associated. So obviously if you're high in systematizing, you're going to have high intelligence, you're going to be better at solving problems, you're going to do better on IQ tests. But there are other dimensions to autism that are relevant as well. And one of these is overstimulation. So people that are autistic are very, very sensitive to noise, they're very, very sensitive to smell, they're hypersensitive. How does that help you solve problems? Well, obviously, the more information you can take in, the more information about the world you can imbibe, the subtler is your understanding of the world, the more you know. And the more you know, the more subtle is your understanding of the world, the more able you are to work out what's really going on, to fit everything together into the big picture and solve the problem. So this is this fundamental issue. On the one hand, yes, it is good to solve a problem, to be able to utterly focus on the one thing and blot everything else out that's irrelevant. But on the other hand, if you can't blot everything else out, if you are autistic and you are incapable of blotting out noise, you are incapable of blotting out extraneous stuff, then you may perceive things and perceive their relevance, which if you were one of these type 2 thinkers, you simply wouldn't perceive. There'll be these things that'll be there that the type 2 thinker will assume are irrelevant, and he'll focus in on the problem. You will perceive these things and you may realise how they relate to the problem. And consequently you would expect people that have very, very high IQ to to be high in aspects of autism, precisely because the IQ is testing your ability to solve problems, and you will be better able to solve the problem. Ironically, yes, you've got to focus, but also the more information you can take in, that helps you to solve the problem. If you want to solve a problem, for example, of how to build a waterproof roof, you will notice, if you take more information in, a subtle difference between this material and this material, and you'll go for the better material. Whereas a person that wasn't able to take as much information wouldn't notice this. So you have this difference whereby, on the one hand, a person who is a normal type 2 thinker can notice little, of course they notice little details. If you tell them to find the grey-haired woman in the crowd, they will find the grey-haired woman in the crowd, and they will remove everything else. Whereas the person who is highly intelligent and high in autism will also be able to find the grey-haired woman in the crowd, but he will also notice other things that are happening in the crowd, and which the person looking for the grey-haired woman will not notice, because he will zoom in on the grey-haired woman, and consequently he may notice something which the person focusing on the grey-haired woman wouldn't notice, such as there's a terrorist in the crowd with a bomb, or whatever. And he wouldn't notice it. So therefore, the person that can see the bigger picture has, on the one hand, the person who's autistic will be focusing on details and whatever, but on the other hand, there's an element to which being high in this autism trait allows you to better perceive the bigger picture, and allows you therefore to solve problems. And so this is why we would expect the person who is the genius to be about to balance, to have a sort of balancing act between type 1 and type 2 thinking. And this appears to be the case, and as evidenced in their relatively low conscientiousness, and as evidenced in the fact that they have these aspects of autism. There would be this balance. Now, this raises a question about life history strategy. We've looked at a lot on this channel before at life history strategy. This is the idea, as I've said, that we're on a scale between fast life history strategy, that's adapted to an unstable yet plentiful environment, therefore you live fast and die young because you could be wiped out every second, moving along to a slow life history strategy, which is that you're adapted to an environment that is stable yet harsh, which means that you therefore compete with other members of your environment, and therefore you have to be highly cooperative, you develop these cooperative groups, and you invest more energy in nurture of your offspring than simply in having lots of offspring in the hope that some survive. And so you get this distinction between R, which is the fast life history, and K, which is the slow life history. Now, what is the genius? Well, the genius has been suggested to be group selected, i.e. two groups that are in conflict. If one of them has more capital geniuses, then those geniuses will come up with solutions to problems to help them win the conflict, such as better weapons or whatever. And so therefore, one of the reasons why geniuses, despite being antisocial, and therefore are strategists, antisocial people that just live fast, die young, and are impulsive, stay in the population, is because they combine these different traits. They combine elements of what we would say a K strategy, such as extremely high intelligence, such as focused kind of thinking or whatever, with elements of an R strategy, such as being uncooperative, such as being low in agreeableness, such as being low in empathy, and this creates the perfect fusion to allow them to solve amazing problems. And this is good for the group because they can solve these problems, they can come up with new weapons or whatever, and therefore the genius is this combination of the two. As individuals as well, if you look at the kind of people that are the geniuses, people like Einstein, people like Newton or whatever, but you can't just say they're a highly intelligent R strategist. It's more complicated than that. They have elements of both. They have aspects of both dimensions. It's a perfect mixture that makes the genius. And so I think that our friend Mr. Kahneman is not only has a lot of his research, some of his research anyway, been subject to the replication crisis, which has been going on in psychology. So some of his experiments haven't actually borne out. But I think more importantly, it has to be understood that this distinction between a fast thinker and a slow thinker is not quite right when it comes to people that are extremely good at thinking indeed. Because when you're extremely good at thinking indeed, then you combine aspects of fast and slow thinking. In the same way, by the way, that if you are extremely K strategy, then there's some evidence that you combine aspects of both, because you are evolved to a particularly narrow niche. And once that happens, then the positive relationship between these different components of K strategy, such as agreeableness, intelligence, and conscientiousness, and age, usual virginity, and puberty age, and whatever, these kind of break up. So you can create the optimum niche, the just right niche, which means that people that are highly K strategists can actually be more R strategists on some individual measures, because that is the niche that they have found themselves in a context in which everybody with a K strategy hasn't. They can't do the same thing. They all have to find very specific niches. And so perhaps that's what's going on with the Genius. The Genius has a very specific niche, and that niche involves the optimum balance as you become very intelligent between aspects of the type 2 intelligence, which is the essence of intelligence really, and aspects of type 1. It's very and much the same way that as you get more intelligent, there is evidence that intelligence itself breaks up. So we have different kinds of intelligence: verbal, linguistic, verbal, mathematical, and spatial, and you have different things that are below that are very narrow, like the ability to drive a car, the ability to do shoelaces, whatever. And you find that as we become more intelligent, then the positive manifold between the different aspects of intelligence breaks up, such that they have huge overall intelligence, but the things that are weakly associated with intelligence, like driving a car, they can't do, because they're only weakly associated with intelligence. And that's very interesting. What Kahneman says, that one of the things that's a sign of being a slow thinker is that you can park a car successfully in a complex space. Well, a lot of people I know who are very intelligent can't drive cars. A.J. Ayer couldn't drive a car. Einstein couldn't drive a car. So I think what we can build upon him by saying is that the Genius is this optimum balance between the two kinds of thinking, and it is that real problem solving comes from this balance between type 1 and type 2, between contemplative sort of thinking and intuitive thinking. That is where Genius comes from. And I'm going to develop this in my next video by talking about the midway, i.e. the absolute opposite of the Genius. And of course, so many of you who watch my show will notice it. Okay, I hope this is a bit of interest. I will see you soon. Remember that we live stream on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 PM UK time, 2 PM New York. If you would like to assist the channel, you can see ways of doing so below. And goodbye! There's one or two things I'd like to say. You've got it all wrong. You don't need to follow me. You don't need to follow anybody. You're all individuals. Yes, we are all individuals. You're all different. Yes, we are all different. I'm not. You've all got to work it out for yourselves. Yes, we've all got to work it out for ourselves. Exactly. Tell us more! Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Jolly Heretic. Now today I would like to talk about the issue of names, and specifically the issue of why it is that everybody seems to have their own obscure, weird name these days. I was once at the Wisley Glow at Wisley Gardens in Surrey, and as I've said before, I met a couple who had a daughter called Tiger Sky. And I asked them why on earth they wanted to call their daughter Tiger Sky. And the answer was, well, it was a unique name. We wanted her to have a unique name, something special, a unique name. And this idea is more and more common. Why is this idea more and more common? It's more and more common because we have runaway individualism. And you therefore signal your individualism and how individualistic you are and what a non-conformist you are by giving your child a bizarre name. Now, ironically, of course, that means that, as with the Life of Brian to which I alluded there, it is being a conformist, it is being traditionalist, it is having a low sense of your self-worth rather than a sense that you're unique and brilliant and special, that is the rebellion. It is conforming to traditional ideas that is the rebellion. It is naming your children using the names that our society has always used, and thus keeping them in touch with the ancestors and what the ancestors did, and all of this sort of thing that creates a group-oriented, united, cohesive society. It is wanting that kind of society that is the rebellion. And it is It is being unique and signalling your uniqueness and signalling it in the names you give your children or yourself or whatever. That is the extreme conformism. Now, how has this happened? Well, as I've discussed before, we were under very strong conditions of Darwinian selection, including group selection, wherein groups that are high in internal cooperation tend to dominate other groups, until about 1800. We then have the Industrial Revolution, and also it starts to get a lot warmer. The result of that is that Darwinian selection pressures become weaker. The result of that is that the child mortality rate falls from 1% to 50%. The result of that is that it becomes more genetically diverse. We deviate from being very, very strongly group-oriented, and basically all genetically very, very similar, and strongly group-oriented, which is a highly genetic trait, to being more and more and more individualist. We become therefore lower in these group moral foundations of obedience to authority, in-group loyalty, and sanctity, whereby you sanctify that which is group adaptive, to being higher in these individualist foundations of equality, where you want everybody to be the same, and of harm avoidance, where you're looking out for the individual. And this increases over time, and other factors as well acts to undermine the religiousness, which tends to take these group-oriented ideas and make them into the will of God, such as that we're low in stress and mortality salience. And so eventually, so many people are individualist rather than group-oriented that a tipping point is reached, which probably happened around about the 60s, where it flips over and everybody migrates onto what seems like the up-and-coming winning team, which is the individualist society. And therefore you get where you used to get, under group conditions, runaway groupism. People would signal their group values, their bravery and whatever. And more intelligent people would imbibe those values, realize they could get ahead by believing them, believe them more, and signal them, leading to runaway group signaling. You get the opposite. More intelligent people imbibe the values of the news system. They realise they can get ahead by convincing themselves of their reality. They convince themselves of their reality, and they signal, run away, how individualistic they are. Now, you see this among particularly people in the middle of society, because if you're in the middle of society, one of the ways that what you're going to want is to get to the top, and you'll do that by signalling individualistic values of equality and harm avoidance, and therefore emotionally manipulating people into thinking you're highly moral or whatever you should get to the top. It's one method. You get this among Protestants. So until the rise of Protestantism, everybody had the same sorts of names: George and Mary and Margaret and Edward and Henry, and these traditional English names. The Protestants came up with this ideology of the priesthood of all believers, whereby everybody was equal and everybody should read the Bible. They signalled their commitment to this by reading the Bible and by saying, "Oh, look, I know all these biblical names," and therefore they gave their children these biblical names that hadn't previously been used, these obscure biblical names like Isaiah and Isaac and whatever. And you get runaway signalling of these ridiculous and also names to do with qualities like temperance and constance and whatever. And you get runaway signalling of these names until by about, I think it was 1591 somewhere, you had a child that was called Heaven on High Hodgson for a song. Heaven on High Hodgson. And so this is an example of how this can happen. Now, this leads to a greater diversity of names, and eventually you get more of an equilibrium. But again, at any given stage, those that want to signal their individualism will do so using the names of their children. So when you get the romanticism ideology coming, again, in the middle class, they want to signal it how romantic they are. So they start using these revived Anglo-Saxon names like Alfred and things like this. And that's always the way. So names are a good marker of what's going on. Now, in a society that's strongly group-oriented, there should be a limit on how ridiculous names become. Often at the bottom of society, by the way, you get people who will signal a degree of individualism, but also they're kind of signalling group loyalty in a way, by naming their children after famous people. So you get the rise of people's surnames as Christian names, about Nelson, Benjamin Disraeli Smith, things like this. But this is held within certain boundaries. What we have now, though, is runaway individualism, where it is considered good to give your children really, really unusual names. Now, at the bottom of society, the way that this manifests, it's still a kind of power search. It's that they will name their children after people that have been famous on TV, like Friends, 5 years after the TV series Friends came out, you've got all these Phoebes and Monicas and Chandlers and whatever in school. But those that are in the middle of society, that's not good enough. They don't want to signal power or whatever, or bless their children with a sense of power. They want to signal individualism, and so therefore they will come up with really silly names. They will make up names, and a good example of that would be something like Tiger Sky. Now, this is definitely happening. Jennifer Tweng has looked at this. Firstly, she's noted that an interest among women in keeping your name, in keeping your maiden name when you get married, is associated with regarding the name as important to the identity, and also with being very high in a sense of uniqueness and thinking basically that you're special. So those are the kinds of people that are interested in the name and interested in using the name as a means of signaling. In another paper called Fitting In or Standing Out, Jennifer Tweng looks at names between 1880 and 2007 in the UK, 325 million baby names, and finds that you have an increase across time in less common names, i.e. an increase in the uniqueness of names, an increase in individualism. Interestingly, this decreases between about 1920 and 1949, which is interesting, and it's consistent with the idea that between the wars we became more conservative and that sort of thing, or more group-oriented, which makes sense considering what's happened. But then after that, off we go again, and there's a massive increase in the uniqueness of names from 1983 onwards. So society is coming apart, not just genetically, not just with polarisation, not just politically, but literally in how people are named. More people have names that nobody else has, and this, of course, is a reflection of runaway individualism and basically the breakdown of society into warring microcosms. Tweng has another paper called Still Standing Out, where she looks at data from 2005 and 2015. Again, huge increase in individualism names. Now, this is a bit of a problem, because she also shows that twin studies have indicated that if you've got a silly name, then this is actually bad for you. Because people, it's not clear why, but in that she's controlling for genetics by and at least for family background by using twin studies. You can't say, oh well, if you've got a silly name, you've got parents that are high in individualism, parents who are maybe high in neuroticism, and therefore they strongly desire to conform to the current ideology because they fear exclusion, and therefore they strongly give their child a unique name, or that they need a sense of structure in their lives because they are neurotic and they're high in negative feelings, and therefore they become extremely individualist and they give their child a unique name. That can't be the case, because there is this is among twins. The twin that has the less desirable name, the name that's considered more weird, in many ways the name that's considered more unique, has worse life outcomes. People with uncommon names are more likely to drop out, they are more likely to be maladjusted, they are more likely to have problems in life, they're more likely to need help, they're more lonely, and whatever. And this, as I say, is controlling the background, so it can't just be some heritable eccentricity. So this implies that it's bad for people to have unique names, because they will be mocked, they will be discriminated against, they will feel there's no one like them. They will feel lonely and strange. You know, when my name's Edward, and when I meet somebody else called Edward, you're a fellow Edward. Right, you've gone through life with the same name as I have. You know, and so you know what that's like. And so they don't experience this, and they perhaps get mocked as a consequence. So it's not good for society. Ironically, it's reflecting a breakdown in the degree to which society is group-oriented. And being group-oriented is associated, by the way, with low levels of mental instability, obviously, because you're more likely to be group-oriented if you're lower mental instability. But also it's impacting, making people more mentally unwell to have these bizarre names. Now, another thing that's changing, it's not what you name, it's how you name yourself. If there's a constant competition to be unique, then people that don't have a unique name will tend to want to come up with one. Now, this has often been the case if you're an actor or something, you want to stand out from the crowd. So Catherine Jones becomes Catherine Zeta-Jones or whatever. But this is happening way beyond that. People are changing their names so that they have more unique and interesting names. And deed polls indicate that the number of people changing their names has doubled since 2015. So this again is consistent with runaway uniqueness. And if you look at the nature of the names that are being given to children, they become sillier and sillier. And it is those that are at the top that are of society that are, of course, the vanguard of this, because they are the vanguard of culture, and culture is increasingly individualism. And so you have David Beckham, perfectly sensible name, giving his son the name Brooklyn Beckham, because Brooklyn is where he was conceived, or something like that. You have Bob Geldof and Paula Yates, perfectly sensible names, giving their daughter the name Peaches Geldof, or giving another daughter the name Heavenly Harana Lily. You have Frank Zappa, well, Zappa's made up of Frank, perfectly sensible name, giving his son the name Moon. So you have people. There was a boy when I was at school. I mean, this is insane. His surname was Michael, so his parents thought they'd make him a bit unique by calling him Michael. And so the uniqueness of names has gone. It used to be something that indicated being of the lower socioeconomic status. We had a group-oriented society in which you conformed. It would be, and you indicated your conformity. It was people at the bottom of society that didn't understand this, didn't abide this ideology, and were anyway less conformist because they tend to be lower in conscientiousness, lower in degree of higher up, and thus less conformist. And so therefore it was the working class that were the generators of strange names, of unusual names. And this would either be a place for status, Benjamin Disraeli Smith or whatever, or Nelson, or Wellesley, or Lusitania, or something that had been in the news, or it would be unique, made up sort of names, or it would be peculiar spellings of normal names. So Gordon spelled Gordon, or that sort of thing. And this has often been noticed among black people as well. You get this sort of thing, because those at the bottom are more individualist. But now that individualism has become the dominant ideology, this has ascended further up the social scale, and it is those that are in the middle and at the top that are generating the most ridiculous names and are playing for status by doing so, by signalling their individualism with their own name and the name of their offspring. And this individualism is can be seen more broadly a desire to be unique, a desire to be completely different. Now, from simply having bizarre names, you get those that simply have one name among those that are high in social status. And I see this as this could be the next step. So you get people who are celebrities that are known as Prince, or Billy, or Cheryl, or Oprah. They're known as one, or Boris even. Those that are of very, very high status simply have one name. And this could be the next step. Ironic, really, because it used to be, if we go back 1,000 years, that the marker of status was having two names. Those that had one name, they were peasants. Those that had a surname, a hereditary surname, they were those of high status. To this day, in Iceland, where there are no hereditary surnames among most people, which is your name and father's name and son, or father's name and daughter, it's the aristocratic families in Iceland that have hereditary surnames. And this was the case in Finland as well until about 100 years ago. Surnames changed according to where you moved to, but the aristocracy had hereditary surnames. This may be going into the reverse because it was a constant desire for uniqueness, which leads to runaway individualism. Another thing, this constant desire to be different, I think, can be seen in this whole transgender movement. This idea that, I'm not binary, I'm not man or woman, I'm something different. And then you have this, you have the pronoun you are, I'm he, I'm him, I'm she, I'm her. But then you have, I'm too unique to be that. I'm too unique to be he or she. I'm some other pronoun that I've come up with. And then there's a list of pronouns. No, I'm too unique to have that pronoun. I have another pronoun which I've just made up because I'm just so unique and so special. And not only that, but you shouldn't cheat. I'm like the Queen. I'm like the monarchy. I will, when you meet the Queen, someone says to you, okay, well, you have to call her Your Majesty first, Ma'am thereafter. I'm like that. I'm going to tell you, you have to address me like this. And then you have to address me like this. And I want there to be sanctions if you don't address me like this. I want you to lose your job. If you don't address me like this, I want to be instantiated into law. So you must address me how I tell you to address me, because I'm so unique and I'm so special, and you have to acknowledge that I'm unique and I'm special, which is of course the ultimate narcissistic thing, to want people to acknowledge how you to defer to you and acknowledge how unique and how special you are. But this is what is happening. You see the same thing in sexuality. When I was a boy, you had straight people and you had gay people. Then you have bisexuality as well. And now there's all this other stuff coming in saying, oh, I'm too different and unique to get anything like that. I'm pansexual. I'm whatever sexual. I'm something else. And these things carry on and carry on and carry on, with very little to stop them, as people constantly want to assert they in this very narcissistic way. Narcissism, of course, being marked by the belief that you're special, that you're different, that there's no one like you. It's almost solipsistic, whereby nothing else exists except you. You're in charge of everything. And you're going to get the same thing with ethnic identity. People say, oh, I'm not this, I'm something else. You're going to, I'm beyond ethnic categories. I'm unique. I'm beyond them. I don't fit into your normal category. It's basically runaway narcissism, because that's what individualism is. It's basically, in its most extreme form, individualism is narcissism. Individualism is saying, I am special. I don't fit in with the group. I am different from other people. I am unique. That is the ultimate narcissistic belief. I am unique, and my children are unique. And what we're seeing is a promotion of this completely anti-group oriented, pro-individualism, narcissistic idea, and it is reflected in the nature of the names. Sorry, it wasn't heaven on a high model, it was safe on a high model. But anyway, the point remains that what those people were doing was signalling their individualism, signalling that they don't conform to the dominant. They conform to something else. But at least they were conforming to some kind of group, and they were playing for status within that group. What we have here is a much broader, less clear group of the dominant ideology of multiculturalism, and whereby you signal your conformity to it, ironically, by being as unique as possible. So you signal your conformity through uniqueness. The true rebellion, the true non-conformity, therefore becomes traditionalism, therefore becomes eschewing all of this and doing what we frankly should do, which is naming our children after our ancestors, naming our children using the names that have always been there in a corpus of names. Finland, until recently anyway, had a name law whereby there were certain recognised names and anything else was banned. Some couple wanted to call their child Axel, spelt as in Axl Rose, rather than the Finnish name Axel. And they went to court about this because they wanted to call their child Axel. But what all teachers will notice, and you're getting it even in Finland now, is this runaway use of extraordinary names, of weird names, foreign names. I remember meeting a girl when I was a child, white girl. And this is only going to get worse, and it reflects the complete breakdown of society. Now, as I've discussed before, these kinds of individualists, they have children, don't tend to have that many, and it is those who are the group-oriented, i.e. the rebellious kinds, that tend to have those children. So we're probably going to see a rise once again in the Henrys, the Jameses, the Edwards, whatever, these traditional, the Margarets, and so on, these traditional names. But anyway, that is the situation. And I thought in honour of Easter, and in honour of Life of Brian, and the idea of keeping the show, whereby you have these definite people who are highly individualistic values, and one of them dares to say, I'm different. I thought it would be worth discussing. Well, I hope this has been of interest, and if it has, then please feel free to subscribe. It really helps me do that. And remember, I live stream on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. New York. If you want to help us out, you can see where you do so below. And to any of the drinkers of the Jolly Heritage who are pregnant, goodness sake, let's start typhus scar. And on that note, goodbye!
Πρωινό με το κουτάλι ή κατευθείαν από τον μπόρ. Άλτρο, απόλαυσέ το με τον τρόπο σου.
I take the same tests year by year, and I am 60% happier than I was 5 years ago because I finally cracked the code. Okay, so
Arthur Brooks,
the world-renowned social scientist,
Harvard professor, best-selling author,
who teaches people how to live a better, happier life.
I've studied the science of happiness, and I found that most of what society tells us is wrong. And we will go into all of this. For example, they found that happiness is about 50% genetic. Introverts tend to have more long-term happiness. And happiness is a mind virus. It will transmit from one person to another person to another person.
Really?
Yeah. They were looking at the trajectory of people's lives, measuring everything for many years, and they found obesity is contagious. When your friends get divorced, you're more likely to get divorced. But also when your friends get happy, you're more likely to get happy. The problem is happiness has been in decline since about 1990. One of the reasons is that we need struggle and suffering for us to actually get the joy that we seek. But we know that, for example, 95% of diets fail is the most unsuccessful industry in the world because the arrival fallacy that when I actually get rid of the belly fat, then I'm actually going to have a more wonderful life. That's actually not true. You actually get more satisfaction from the progress.
Okay, so if not a weight number or a financial number, what's a better, more realistic goal to set that has more chance of success to being happier?
There are goals that actually do lead to the happiest life, and the more you have, the better off you are. The 4 goals that really matter are...
Quick one. This is really, really fascinating to me. On the back end of our YouTube channel, it says that 69.9% of you that watch this channel frequently over the lifetime of this channel haven't yet hit the...
Town is under siege.
I take the...
Our allies' town is under siege. Forces are under attack.
Yeah.
Our
Of
town
course, it's
is
just
under siege.
unbelievable. They see the world in that way. I've just been reading this absolutely, as you know, I'm a scientist, and I've just been reading this absolutely superb book. It's incredible. You know, we've no clear definition of race. I mean, what do we mean by race? What is race? How can we talk about race if we have no clear definition of it? We can't even absolutely draw the line between one race and another. There is no such thing as race. It's just completely arbitrary. There's no clear border between one race and another. So what do we mean by race? How can we talk about race if we don't even have a clear definition of what it means? You know, the definition of race has changed over time. We used to talk about the Irish as a race or the English as a race, and now we've altered our definition of race. So how can there be such a thing as race if the definition of race has changed? And one of the things I just found in this amazing book is that there's no one single gene that's only found in one race. So how can there be such a thing as race if there's no one single gene that delineates race? I mean, it's obviously how can you can't define race? You can't define 100% accuracy. How can there be such a thing as race? Anyway, even if we could, race is inextricably linked to colonialism, to racism, to National Socialism. And so, that being the case, how can race possibly be a scientific category if it carries with it that kind of cultural baggage, that kind of immoral baggage that means it's inextricably linked into many of the evils of humanity. So how can something that is linked to the evils of humanity define humanity? Surely something that relates to humanity and defines humanity must also define the good in humanity and the highest aspects of humanity. And race doesn't do that. There's no clear border between races. And so this is an excellent book. It's really got me thinking, what do we mean by race? What do we mean by science? Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this edition of the Jolly Heretic. Now, that is the kind of illogical, fallacious, and generally appalling argument that you will hear from the midwit. And this is what I want to look at today. This is what I want to try and understand. The psychology of the midwit. The nature of the midwit. This is a term we've all heard bandied around on Twitter, bandied around on the internet, the midwit. And what I want to try and make sense of is who is the midwit? What is the midwit? What makes the midwit? What makes certain people that write books with titles such as How to Argue with a Racist What makes them who they are? What is their psychology? What is the psychology of a midwit? Well, first of all, let's start thinking about what a midwit is. So, in general, in intelligence tends to be measured by IQ tests.